Hey, welcome back, everybody. This is Low Hanging Fruit Part 2. We're going to be talking about the cousin finding strategy. Now, I know that in the first episode we talked a little bit about what the strategy is for, but I just want to reiterate that. But really quick, make sure if you haven't watched Part 1 of this video, go back and watch part 1 to set up your computer, because we aren't going to go through any of the setup this time. We're just going to dive right into it. So, this cousin finding strategy is a strategy that we've developed in order to find hundreds of names, literally, to send to the temple in a very short time. And this particularly is for those who think their family history work is done. Most of us have an Aunt Sally or an Uncle Fred who has done a lot of family history work, and so it appears that there's no more to do. Well, that's just not true. We're all related to basically everyone else on the earth. The trick is finding them, and so we're going to try and find some cousins rather than our grandparents. So we'll talk a little bit about that. First of all, though, I want to give you a quote from President Thomas S. Monson. He says, "Our job is to search out our dead and then go to the temple and perform the sacred ordinances that will bring to those beyond the veil the same opportunities we have." That is a divine mandate from our Heavenly Father through his prophet, Thomas S. Monson. And we know that most of us have a testimony of this, but don't really know how to go about doing it. Today, I hope to show you a relatively painless way of doing this. Another important thing to note is in the Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord says, "Behold, I will hasten my work in its time." And we've seen that a lot lately. The Lord is hastening his work, and it is the Lord hastening it. We're just trying to keep up. And I think you'll see as we share some of the inspired technologies that have been developed today to participate in this work, you'll see how this work is speeding up. So, it's really important as you're doing family history to pick the right strategy. For example, if you see this tree here, this fan chart is mostly full. I think this picks most of your run-of-the-mill second or third generation members of the church. Now, if you're newer to family history, or if you're maybe a recent convert, this strategy probably isn't for you. You need to begin first by finding some of the close deceased relatives. But for those of us who have had that uncle or aunt who have done a lot of family history, this is for us. You may have a section in your tree like I do that we just don't know. It's kind of been the family roadblock, and this is the most frustrating part about family history. Everybody immediately jumps in and goes to those roadblocks, bangs their head against a wall for a few weeks or months or maybe even years, and gets frustrated because we can't take it back farther. And quite frankly, we waste hours trying to break through this brick wall. I want to offer to you a unique perspective that maybe that brick wall is there because those ancestors on the other side of the veil have not yet received the gospel and aren't ready to take on the ordinances of salvation. So let's wait until they accept the gospel and some inspiration happens and there's a record or a new technology that easily helps us break through that barrier. Instead of spending hours on them, we can spend hours finding hundreds of our cousins and going to the temple and doing their temple work. So we're going to leave those alone. We don't want to touch those in this strategy. That is not what we're talking about today, okay? And I want you to think through this. So if you go back from 10 generations and count up all of your ancestors, in the first generation you'll have 2, and then 4, 8, right? All the way on up the line. until you have a grand total of 2,047 ancestors. That's a pretty finite number, and for most of us who have been around the church for a while, most of those people have been done. We tie back into lines where other members have done them, and there's really not a lot of temple work to be done there. However, if you go back to that 10th generation and begin looking at the descendants of some of your 10th great grandparents, an interesting phenomenon occurs. Let's take one set of your 10th great grandparents and we start coming forward and assuming that they had 4 children, then those 4 children had 4 children, and this is just on average, and come forward till 110 years ago. We're going to exclude the last 110 years because we can't do any temple work for anyone who was born within the past 110 years without permission. And we'll go into that rule later. But we'll just excuse them for numbers' sake. If we do that, then on average from one of your 10th great grandparents, they'll have a little over 16,000 grandchildren. Your temple and family history work is not done in your family. 16,000 children from just one set of 10th great grandparents is pretty impressive. In fact, if we go forward then and compare all of your cousins from that 10th great grandparents to compare that number of people to the ancestors you get going directly backwards, it's quite staggering. In fact, as we said before, you have a little over 2,000 ancestors going directly backwards. But if we take all of your 10th great grandparents, you have about 1,000 of them, and come forward and times that by that 16,000, you get almost 8.5 million cousins that you can potentially do the temple work for. So now thinking about it that way, there's no way all of those 8.5 million people have had all of their temple work done. So we want to help you with this strategy to find those 8.5 million cousins that you have. We're going to do this using some inspired technologies. The first one is Family Search. That's where we're actually going to reserve the temple work. Hope Chest is a tool that is going to help us to scan Family Search and quickly find good opportunities to potentially have cousins that we can take to the temple. Then we're going to use Relative Finder in that strategy as well to help us really find a 10th great grandparent to start coming forward and looking at their children for. The last thing we're going to use is a friend who's not related to you, an unrelated friend. The reason for this is you're going to find how that unrelated friend is related to you. You're probably at least 10th cousins with them. But the other piece why we have you do that is family history work is much more fun if you do it together with a friend. So we'll talk about some strategies you can do if you don't have a friend available. But try and find a friend. Pause this, call someone, and do the strategy with them. It's going to be much easier if you're working together with someone else. Okay, so let me summarize what we're going to do here. Usually, if we're going to research our cousins, we start going back maybe 4 or 5 generations, and then we stop there, and we just come forward trying to look for people we can take to the temple. Oftentimes that puts us maybe in the early 1800s, maybe mid 1800s. And the problem is as we start coming forward, people have been pretty diligent, especially if you have that Aunt Sally or Uncle Fred who's taking care of the family history. They've gotten a lot of those cousins. And so people tend to get frustrated because maybe they find new cousins, but they hit that 110-year rule where they can't do any of the temple work without permission. So what we're going to do is go beyond that. In fact, we're going to take you back 8 to 10 generations, and we're going to use Relative Finder to quickly take you back to a 10th generation ancestor. who lived in the 16 to 1700s. After we find that ancestor, then we're going to jump over into family search and begin looking at their descendants. And we'll use Hope Chest to begin coming down the line, scanning through their descendants until we find a temple opportunity where maybe there's been a little bit of research done, but we'll teach you how to do just a little bit of research aided by the computer in order to verify if that person is ready for temple ordinance work or not. Once we find some that are, we're going to go ahead and reserve those temple names. Now, the wonderful thing about Hope Chest is it is very quickly going to find you hundreds of places you can just do a little bit of research. We're not going to get into the deep, dark, mysterious stuff. We're going to stay very high level. In fact, if it starts getting too hard, my recommendation is you move on to another person until you learn how to do the strategy a little better. So let's just jump on in. Again, as we mentioned in part 1 of these videos, that you've got to use the right browser. There's lots of good browsers out there, but for this particular strategy, we encourage you to use Google Chrome. Hope Chest is an extension to Google Chrome and currently isn't available in any of the other browsers. So to do this, you must have Google Chrome. You can download that in any other browser if you don't have it, and then get it set up. If you don't already have it set up, pause this and go back to video 1. Okay, but once you're in Google Chrome, then we want you to go to relativefinder.org. Just type it in your URL, all one word, .org, and hit enter. You can also just Google it. Either way, you're going to come to this website. This is Relative Finder's homepage, and we just want you to click down at the bottom where it says log in with Family Search. That's just going to take you to the normal Family Search login page, and go ahead and enter your username and hit sign in. Your username and password and hit sign in. That's going to take you over here into Relative Finder. Now let me explain a few things about Relative Finder. Relative Finder is a program that is put together by some BYU students. They run and operate this. They're simply showing us how we're related to famous people, either from history or people who are alive now, such as prophets and presidents. Okay, you can also connect with people that you know to see how you're related. For example, one way to do that is by clicking over here on groups. Now you can create a group. I've created a group for my ward, and I've had had members of my ward join the group so that we always can be working together. We see how we're related, and that's kind of fun. But we also want to make sure that we have somewhere to go when we don't have a friend with us to be able to do this strategy. So there's lots of public groups, there's private groups. If you aren't part of a group, you can even just start with a famous person and we'll start researching on your common ancestor. But for our particular case, I told you we needed an unrelated friend. So get your friend set down right next to you and come over here and click on connect. Okay. Once you get that drop down menu, you want to connect with a living person. That's going to show how you and your friend sitting next to you are related to. So go ahead, click on with a living person, and then you need to start a session. So just come over here and click create. Once you do that, it's going to come up with a session ID right here. Now this session ID is going to be really important. So have your friend also come into this page, and on their screen, they're going to take your session ID and put it in the join session box. And then they'll hit join. Once they do that, it's going to bring you to this page to show you how you're related. Now, I did this with my wife, actually, Madeline Case. That's my wife. And here I am. This is how we're related, okay? We're 10th cousins. Whew, my wife was a little concerned when I first did that, but we're all good. So we're 10th cousins, And so that takes us again back to 8 or 10 generations away. And so we want to start there. So on Thomas Moody, I'm going to hit view. Now this is going to show how we're related. If you scroll down, we would see exactly how we are related, tying back to Thomas Moody. And we can view several options, but really we want to go straight to family search because this gives us a starting point. So if you just click on the name of your common ancestor, in this case, I'll click on Thomas Moody. Once I click on Thomas Moody, it's going to try to take me over to Family Search. Since we haven't signed into Family Search recently, again, you need to put in your Family Search username and password and then hit sign in. Once you do that, it's going to take you to Thomas Moody's homepage, okay? Or person page, I guess you could say. The easiest thing to relate this to is probably a Facebook profile page. This is Thomas Moody's profile page. This is everything and anything we know about him all right here. Now we have other tutorials you can go through and watch in order to learn more about this person page and what you can do on it. And you can get familiar with those. But we aren't going to stay on this person page for Thomas too long. In fact, if you come over here and click on View Tree, that's exactly where we want to go. So here's his tree. Going off to the right are his ancestors, he and his wife's ancestors, but going to the left are their children. So we can start searching their children for temple opportunities in order to come forward and view some of those 16,000 descendants that they have. Now, we're ready to use Hope Chest, but before we use Hope Chest, I want you to make sure that Thomas Moody's correct wife is showing up, or your ancestor's correct wife. Sometimes they were married multiple times. You want to make sure that the wife that was on Relative Finder is showing up. Okay, that way Hope Chest has a better chance of working for you. So we'll come over. Remember, in the first tutorial, up here in the corner, this Hope Chest icon was grayed out. Well, now there's color in it because we're in Family Search Family Trees, so you can actually use it. So we'll go ahead and click on Hope Chest. It brings up this drop-down menu. Now, there's a lot of things you can do with Hope Chest. You can change settings, and there's even some video introductions if you want to go back and watch those. Those are always in that menu. But we're going to go ahead and click Search Descendants. That's going to begin scanning through Thomas Moody's descendants. So we clicked on that. It pops up this box. Now, just so you know, a gentleman has taken of his spare time and his talents and put together this Hope Chest extension. He's programmed it, spent many hours doing it. He does it as a free service. However, he needs to supplement that service somehow, and so you have the opportunity to pay $10 for it. It is not required, but I do suggest that you do it so you get all the full functionality and also donate to this cause. But in this case, we don't want to pay, so let's click Just Do Search. After that, this other box comes up asking you where you want it to list out all of the temple opportunities that it finds. Since you haven't paid, the inbox is the only place where it would put them, so you can just hit Start Search. Okay, and I want you to watch closely what happens once we hit Start Search. It goes through and just starts scanning all of the descendants, opening them up, and it's looking for temple opportunities. Now, it might pass up some that have green temples on them. That's because it's not low-hanging fruit, and you can adjust the settings to pick those up later. But you want to let this run for as long as it can. I have a friend who did this. He started letting it run on one ancestor and came back to it 4 hours later, and it had found over 800 opportunities. That's only after his laptop had died. So it will scan forever. So you might want to walk away, just let it scan and let it keep going, okay? But once it's done scanning, then, or even while it's scanning, you can go ahead and click back here on Hope Chest up in the corner. This time we want to actually click on the Hope Chest application up here at the top. So we'll go ahead, click on it. I've let it run. So here's what Hope Chest looks like. There's a lot of stuff here, but I want you to notice this. Up in the corner, it's found 135 ancestors, or excuse me, cousins, who have high potential for me being able to go in and do the temple work. Yours will look something like this. Now, I want to offer a caution. Just because someone is on this list doesn't mean that you can just run out and willy-nilly reserve them for temple work. You don't know at this point if this person was even a real person or if they were living. You have no way to verify that. Maybe the family tree is only as good as the information we give it. So maybe someone had a theory and they put someone on the family tree. We're just not sure. And so we are going to teach you how to verify these names and make sure they're ready for temple work. With that caution, though, this is a great place to start doing some research. So we're going to dive in. So right here is the names column. These are the cousins who potentially you will be doing temple work for. Over here on the right is all of their ordinances. So B for baptism, C for confirmation, initiatory endowment, sealing to parents, and sealing to spouse. If they're gray, it means they've already been done. If they're red, it means someone else has reserved them but has not yet done them, so you can't reserve them. If they're yellow, it means you've reserved them but haven't done them. Okay? If there's a dark green, that means that you've done them. And if it's a light green, it means no one's reserved them and you could reserve them. So that's awesome. There's a lot of temple opportunities here. Now, what I like to do, or before we get into that actually, over here on the left-hand side, these different icons will take you to different locations within Family Search. So the tree will take you to that person's family tree. The orange profile picture will take you to their person page, etc. Okay. Now, we want you to do what I normally do and start at the bottom of the list. And so we're going to go to page 12 by hitting that second arrow over here. The reason I go to the bottom of the list is it's kind of easier for me to manage. As you're going through, once you've researched everything you can about each one of these persons, you're going to want to hit the check mark next to their name and delete them off of this list. Once you've reserved their name for temple ordinances or figured out if they don't need temple ordinances. The reason for that is that every time you run Hope Chest, it'll just keep adding to this number of people in your Hope Chest, and it doesn't ever take them off, and it can get really messy and confusing. So once you've done the research, remove them so that you can really just have an ongoing working to-do list. That being said, let's start here with Orion Thompson and research a little more about him. Now we want to go to his person page to learn everything that we can about him. So we'll click on his person page. Here it is, Orion Thompson. Now you can see a lot of icons here, a lot of information. Let me explain some of that really quick. Whenever we're taking someone's name to the temple, Family Search has some specific things that they require in order for you to do temple ordinance work. I've also added one thing in here to that I suggest as part of the strategy. You make it a requirement in your mind, and I'll talk about that as we get there. So Family Search first requires a first name and a last name, because how can you do the temple ordinance work for someone if you don't even know their name? Okay. Also, you need a gender so that we know who does their temple work in the temple. Is it a male or is it a female who will do that? Okay. Now, if you have a man whose name is John Smith, how do we tell which John Smith it is? That's about the most common name in America. So we do that by finding a date, and we want to pick a major date in his life. maybe a birth date, a marriage date, or a death date. Those are kind of the three main ones. So pick a date that will narrow it down. But you could have two John Smiths born on the same day in the same year. And so we also want a place to go along with that date. That way we can pinpoint exactly who this John Smith is to a pretty high degree. So family search requires all of that. The one thing they don't require is the next thing on that list, which is the one source. A source is a record, like a birth certificate or a census record, that proves that person existed. Sometimes a lot of names will come out of people's family Bibles or out of someone's memory, but we want proof that they've existed. Just like when you were writing a paper in high school or college, you always sourced everything. Your teacher said, source it, prove it to me. Well, that's what we want to do. We want to prove it. And the sources are the only ways that we can prove it. So, and we particularly want a source that indicates that that person lived past the age of 8. Just like we don't do baptisms and confirmations or any of the other ordinances for children who died before the age of 8. I mean, Family Search knows that a person died before the age of 8. If you put in a death date and a birth date, then it won't let you reserve the ordinances. So we want to make sure everybody lived past the age of 8 so that we aren't wasting time in the temple, because those children don't need it. The last one, again, is a requirement from Family Search. And the people we're looking for need to have been born over 110 years ago. The reason for that is, if someone was born 109 years ago, there's a high likelihood that their children are still living. And family history is about family and bringing families together. But if you have a person who's not a member of the church, who doesn't understand temple and family history work, we don't want them getting upset at you for doing the ordinance work for their parents. And so Family Search, if they've been born within 110 years, makes you get permission from the closest living relative. Sometimes that's easy, but if people aren't too happy with the church, or if you don't even know them, it can be hard to get permission. So for this strategy, don't even worry about that for right now. We want to make sure that the person was born over 110 years ago. Now, we're going to refer back to this list a lot as we're doing research. So I'd suggest you commit it to memory or write it down somewhere as kind of your personal checklist as you're looking for people. The other thing you're going to see on this person page is a lot of icons. Now, we have other tutorials that will explain more about iconology within Family Search, but here's 4 basic ones that you need to know about. The blue icon is what we commonly refer to as a record hint. This is where the computer has found a record that it thinks is a record for the person that you're looking at. We'll talk more about this in a minute, but this is going to be super useful to you. Okay, purple is fertile ground for research, or they call it a research suggestion to start looking here. For example, if a couple had 6 children, but in between child 4 and 5 there's a 6-year gap, but all the other children were born every 2 years, it's a pretty good assumption that they had more children born within those 6 years between child 4 and 5. So there's potential to go and do some research. So that's what that purple road sign icon is. Now this bright red exclamation point is your opportunity to help the computer search for records better. A computer can only search on standardized names, dates, and places. If the dates and places in particular aren't standardized, then it's really hard for the computer to search. And so this red icon will pop up. It'll tell you whether it's a date or a place or even a name that needs to be standardized. You can fix that in order to help the computer do more research for you even better. The last icon is a green temple icon. Now, this is what we all want. This is the icon we get the most excited about. A green temple icon means that you can do ordinance work for that person and take their name to the temple. And we're gonna look a lot at these green temple icons here in a minute. So that's the basic icons you're gonna see. So let's jump back over now onto the person page for Orion Thompson. Here he is. So let's start going down that checklist that we mentioned earlier. So we have a first and a last name. So there's the first one. We have his gender. We have a date and a place. And these are tied to a significant life event, his birth. So we're doing pretty good. We've hit the first four. Now we want to make sure there's a source. And if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a section that says sources. And if you look in there, there's no sources. So we're going to need to find a source to attach to him. So we haven't done check mark number 5. Let's go back up and check now and verify he was born over 110 years ago. He was born in 1898. So, yep, obviously it's been over 110 years. So we'll be good to go. So let's find a source for him so that we can verify that he actually lived. Now, over here on the right, we see some record hints. These are records that the computer has found that it is 95% sure that this record belongs to our guy. So it has a different first name. We'll talk about that in a second. But just realize that only 1 in 20 of these records will be wrong. So more often than not, it's the right person we're looking for. Okay, so Hubert Orion Thompson. They got the Orion Thompson part. I scrolled down and looked farther below, and his wife's name is Marjorie Elizabeth Bryan. So if there's 2 or even 3 points of data that I'm sure are either exact on or pretty close, we can assume this record is about him. Okay, now this is a birth certificate of a daughter, Dorothy Jean Thompson. So just like on your birth certificate, it lists your name, a lot of information about you, and then the parents' names. That's what's going on right here. So I verified this. I'm pretty sure this is our Orion Thompson. So I scrolled down a little bit, and we're just going to hit review and attach. This is going to take us into a tool that's going to help us attach this source. And here's what it looks like. This is what we call the source linker. Let me explain the concept behind the source linker really quickly to you. Family Search has 2 databases. You can think of these databases as 2 file cabinets sitting next to each other, and they have a bunch of files in them. Okay? And all day long, the computer is comparing these 2 databases or file cabinets. It's taking a file out of one and comparing it to all the files on the other side to see if they match. Now, what's in these file cabinets? Well, on the right side is all the information that we have entered into Family Search, either from 4-generation pedigree charts, family Bible, people doing other research. This is all of the information that we as members of the church and our friends have put into Family Search. Okay, and that's the information really that appears on the person page. So that's in one file cabinet. In the other file cabinet, there are these records. Now, the church has spent years and years and years going around the world taking pictures of documents and records. Once the picture is taken, then thanks to our wonderful indexers, those indexers will look at the picture, type the information they see in the picture into the computer. Because the computer can't read pictures, but it can read text typed into it. And so it knows, okay, this particular one is Frank Nelson. So the computer, or in the file cabinet on the left, it's got all these records. So all it's doing simply then is comparing the records to all the information we've already put in the tree all day long. And when it finds a match, this blue record hint icon opens up. And it puts it on the person page just like we saw. Now, all we want to do is essentially, metaphorically speaking, paperclip these two records together so they're attached, so that we know these records go together and that record doesn't go to anybody else in the tree. Although it might have family members in the tree, but in the computer we can attach it to multiple family members, okay? So let's show you how this is done again with that source linker tool. So here's what we're looking at. On the left-hand side is that first file cabinet. This is a record found in that first file cabinet, okay? On the right-hand side is the record from the family tree or the person page. And so we just simply need to compare the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So let's start looking. Here we have Hubert Orion Thompson. Now I'll bet this is the same person because maybe this guy hated his first name Hubert. You ever met someone who didn't like their first name? I have. So this guy maybe went by Orion his entire life, but when it came to legal documents, he had to put his first name on. So it's Hubert Orion. Okay, his gender's the same. That's good to know. And as we mentioned before, his wife is the same. So when we have 2 or 3 points of data that match up, I feel great about attaching them. So I'm just going to come over here and click attach. Now you can't give a reason to attach to this, especially if you've made a far mental jump or a lot of assumptions. I'll put my assumptions in that reason to attach and go ahead and hit attach. Now it's turned green. That record and that person are now attached. So yay, we have our first source. But you also want to make sure you attach the record to the rest of the people on the record. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So here's his wife, Marjorie Elizabeth Bryan. We'll hit compare. Everything looks good here. So again, we're just going to attach it. So now we've attached the two. Now, there's that daughter we mentioned before, Dorothy Jean Thompson. Look at that. There's nobody in our family tree that matches Dorothy Jean Thompson. That means we've just found a person to add into the tree. Now, you can add her really simply just by clicking on add. When you do that, it's going to pop up the sidebar. And this is all the information. We just want to verify, yes, her first and middle name is Dorothy Jean, last name Thompson. She was a female. Here's her birth date. It's standardized. That's what the green means. The place she was born, that came right off of the record. Now, we just need to indicate, was she living or deceased? Now, looking at her birth date, she was born in 1935. There is a chance she is still alive. That would make her between somewhere in her 80s or 90s. And so I am just going to assume then that she's alive. Since I can't prove that she's been deceased, we're going to mark her as living. We'll do some more research later on our own time to see if she's actually passed away. But because she's been born within the last 110 years, we can't do temple work for her anyway. So I'm just going to go ahead and mark her as living. And then down here, we'll just create new person and add her on into the tree as the daughter of Orion and Marjorie. Okay, so now she's been added and it's wanting us to attach this record. So we'll just go ahead and hit attach because she's obviously the person on the record. That's why we added her. So now we have the whole family attached. This is pretty neat that we've been able to add some people and find some new information. Now, remember, we found out his first name is Hubert. So let's go back and change his name. So if we'll come up here and click on Orion Thompson, that takes us back to his person page. If we want to edit his name, just go ahead and click on his name right here and it'll pop open this box. It gives a little information about who put in his name, why they think that information is correct, but we found more information about it. So we want to hit edit. up here in the first name box, we want to type in Orion, or excuse me, type in Hubert. So we'll put in Hubert, and then we'll give a reason for why we changed that. We didn't correct a typo. That's what the last person did. We would just put in that on his daughter's birth record, it mentioned his first name was actually Hubert. His middle name was Orion. We typed that on in there, and then scroll down just a little bit, and there's a save button, and we'd hit save. And look, his name now shows up as Hubert Orion. So, let's just run through our checklist really quick. We have an accurate first and last name this time. Again, we have a gender, we have a date and a place for his birthday. We have one source that verified that he lived past the age of 8. Now that's important. This was his daughter's birth record, and so we're going to assume in order to have a child, he had to live past the age of 8. That's a pretty good assumption. I'll let you make that judgment call. And then we know he's lived past 110 years. So we've met all the requirements we need in order to send his name to the temple. So in order to do that, you're going to click on the word ordinances up here by the green temple. And there are several tabs within the person page, but the ordinance tab is where we look at his temple ordinances. So here we are. If we scroll down further, we would see that it's just his sealing to spouse that needs to be done. The red, again, means that somebody else has reserved his initiatory and his endowment. So we really can't do the sealing to spouse until this person is done with all of the ordinances that are preparatory to that. But we'll go ahead and request it so that once those are all done, we'll be able to do that sealing. So I'm going to just click on the big blue request ordinances. Once we do that, if there are any problems the computer finds, it'll come up in a yellow error message up here. But there aren't any problems, so we'll just hit request. Right up here. Once we hit request, it's going to pop up this church policy. Now, I encourage you to read through this church policy all the way. In fact, at the bottom, you have to verify that you have read the policy, and where this is church stuff, we really don't want to lie and say that we did when we haven't. So, read it once. Here's the gist of it, though. You promise, as a member of the church, that you won't submit temple names for famous people. Lots of people would do that if we didn't have that rule. You also won't submit temple names for those who gathered through unapproved extraction projects. Okay, one of those in particular is Jewish Holocaust victims. The church had a project going once doing a bunch of temple ordinances for Jewish Holocaust victims, and the Jewish community, because they didn't understand the nature of temple work, ordered a cease and desist and just said, don't do it. Instead of getting in a legal battle, the church said, that's fine, we won't do it. And so you as a member of the church need to uphold that end. So just be careful, don't do Jewish Holocaust victims. The last thing is persons born within 110 years, right? That's the 110-year rule we were talking about. You can't reserve a name unless you verify that you have received permission from the closest living relative. So once you've read all of that, then go ahead and come down here and click on that box saying, yes, I have read this, and then add it to your temple ordinance list. Okay, and once you do that, the green temple now turns into a blue temple, and you have a temple ordinance list that you could print from. We'll show you how to do that in a second, but remember we added a record for his wife. And this is a sealing to spouse. So let's just go back and make sure that she is ready to have her sealing done. So we'll come back here to details and scroll down on the details page to the family members. Here we see Hubert, his wife Marjorie, his daughter Dorothy that we added, and then before this tutorial I also added another daughter that was a record hint. That was Marjorie Luella Thompson. Okay. And again, I indicated she was living because I'm not sure if she's dead or alive. She could still be alive. Um, so Marjorie Elizabeth Bryan, we want to click on her and see if she needs her temple work done. So just click on her blue name. That means it's a link. And it pops up this person card. And what do you know? She needs all of her temple work done. The sealing to spouse is yellow because we just reserved it by reserving that sealing with Hubert. But before we can do that sealing, we've got to make sure all of this temple work is done. So let's go ahead and click on person. Okay. Now here's Marjorie's person page. We want to verify that everything on our checklist is there. So we have a first name and a last name, a middle name even. That's a bonus for us. Good on us. Okay. We have her gender. She's female. We have her birth date and her birthplace. So there's a date and place. We also have a source. Remember, we added a source for her on that birth record. And then looking at her date, her birth date, she was born in 1906. That means she was born 111 years ago. So we can reserve her temple ordinances. So let's go ahead and do that. Just click on the green temple or the word ordinances next to it. And that'll take you to our ordinance page. Now it's a lot easier to see. Here's what it looks like. You can request each of these ordinances individually or all together. We're going to request it all together, so just click on request ordinances. Again, if there was an issue, a yellow box would pop up within this window. Nothing's popped up. So let's go ahead and just click on request. Again, every time you request temple ordinances, you have to verify that you're going to abide by this church policy. So click I've read it and then add to temple ordinance list. Pretty simple. Now, we've reserved names to take to the temple. So now we want to print out the temple cards. You can do that either by clicking here on print in the page or up in the menu. There's always that temple at the very top. If you click on temple, it's going to take you to the same place as print does. So we'll click on temple. This is your temple reservation list. It shows everybody you have reserved for temple. So I've got a lot of people reserved here by doing this strategy. In fact, we've literally sent hundreds of names to the temple by doing this strategy. But right now, we just want to print out Marjorie Elizabeth Bryan and Hubert Orion Thompson. And because the ordinances are yellow, that means they're not printed. So let's just go ahead. You have to click on the checkbox next to the name of those you want to print. So we'll click on that checkbox. Now it brings up a few options. You can share this name with the temple so that people at the temple will just perform the ordinances as they come in. And that might take up to 6 months to get completed. You could also share this with other members of the church in your family simply by clicking on share, and it will say share with a family member. You can enter in their email. It'll send them an email saying, hey, so-and-so has offered to have you do this temple work. You have 2 weeks to print this out to accept the temple work or reject the fact that you'll do it. And so they have 2 weeks to decide. If at the end of the 2 weeks they haven't decided, it automatically is rejected and sent back here into your temple queue. So we don't want to share today. We want to print these out so that we can do them individually. So if you click on print right up here, it's going to pop open this message. You have two options. You can print family ordinance cards directly and cut them out and take them to the temple. You can also print an FOR, which is a family ordinance request. It's a sheet that if you print it out, it just has a barcode on it without the temple card. And you take it to the temple, they'll scan the barcode and print out your cards. But we don't want to print out a paper just so someone else can print out a piece of paper that's a card. So we're going to print out the cards directly here. So I always choose option 1. Okay, once you click on that, it's going to have you review, make sure you know which record or which ordinances you're printing out. So if I only want to do the baptisms and confirmations, say that I'm a youth, then I could just print those out by unchecking the rest of the boxes. But we want to do them all. So there's 6 there. The 5 ordinances for the individual, and then the sealing of both husband and wife together. So let's just go ahead and click on continue. Then the next step, it's just giving you some instructions. So they want you to print only on white paper. Don't put pink paper or blue paper in your machine. Just print on white paper. It makes it easier for those at the temple. So we print on white paper, and then we'll prepare them by cutting them out. Now there's cutting lines on each of them, but it kind of shows you how to cut them out to the right size. And then just take these to the temple and perform them directly. So awesome. Let's just hit continue. Since we're ready to do that, it's going to open a PDF on your computer and automatically open the option to print that PDF. So you're just going to, just like printing anything else from your computer, you're going to want to pick the right printer and just click on print. And that's going to print out. Once you close that tab, it'll take you back here. Now don't ignore this screen. This is important. It's asking you to verify if the card was printed out correctly. Sometimes your printer gets a printer jam. Maybe you run out of ink or something else happens. And you have to reprint them. So it won't make those cards go live until you hit yes. If you hit no, it's going to act like you never printed the cards. Or you could just hit retry if you had an issue. And then once you print them, it'll come back here, and then we'll just go ahead and click on yes, okay? To verify that, yes, they did print out correctly. And that changes the colors of the ordinances from yellow to green, meaning that you've got them printed out and you're ready to go. So this is reserving your first name for temple ordinances. I hope at this point you've reserved your own name. It's pretty exciting. If you haven't, go back through this and pause and stop and go backwards and forwards within this video. We did this as a video so that you can really spend the time learning how to do this process. Okay, and you just, once you've done this, go back to Hope Chest and research the rest of those hundreds of people within Hope Chest. And if you went into Hope Chest and it didn't find very many people, well, pick another ancestor in Relative Finder, okay? In fact, let's walk through what we just did. Remember, we didn't just start going back 4 or 5 generations and looking for cousins. Rather, we jumped to 8 or 10 generations with Relative Finder, taking us to the 16 or 1700s. We don't necessarily wanted to research in the 16 to 1700s. So in Family Search, Hope Chest helped us to get back into roughly the 1800s probably, and we were able to look up and find those green temple opportunities, and then we went in and verified and made sure those temple opportunities were correct. I know people who have literally, like I said, been sending hundreds of names to the temple doing this. And just as a reminder, that list of things you need in order to send a name to the temple are have a valid first and last name, have a gender, have a date and a place of a major life event. So you want the date of that life event and the associated place that it happened. Also, you want a source that verified that this individual lived past the age of 8 so that we can do their temple work. And prove that this person did in fact exist. Also, you want to verify that they were born over 110 years ago or get permission from the closest living relative. Like I said in the beginning, getting permission can be tough and discouraging, so just skip over those who have been born in the past 110 years. And if you can't find a source very easily, skip them and move on. As you get better and as you take different tutorials, you'll be able to find sources better. In fact, there will be problems that you'll run into. Maybe there's possible duplicates, there's data problems. You need to find specific records within Family Search. All of those are more complex. Stick to the basics. If you want to learn more about these things, we're going to have other videos on the website and YouTube channel that will help you learn how to use each of these individual tools. Other than that, that's about it for this strategy. I hope it will bless your life in helping you find lots of family names to take to the temple and go to the temple and do them. I know as you do that, not only will you experience the blessings of being in the house of the Lord, but you'll have the protection of those cousins helping you, making sure you stay worthy and protected to get to the temple. I know that's true. The prophets and apostles have promised as we participate in this holy and sacred work that we will truly be blessed in all aspects of our life. With whatever challenge you're facing, I know doing this temple and family history work will help you be able to get through that challenge, even if it doesn't seem like it in the beginning. I promise it will. I've seen that in my own life. I just want to say thanks for watching, and we hope to have you check out some of the other tutorials and look forward to having you view those videos.